Hello, Shirley Adams with Patternless Blouses, the last of this series. Now the reason you might want to make a patternless blouse is, of course, because it's pretty quick and easy. But beyond that, here are some other reasons. For one thing, you might want to avoid breaking up a large design into a lot of pieces with standard seams. The blouse I'm wearing is one of these patternless blouses, and it's such a huge design. If I had standard seams, I'd have to worry about matching places that I really would have liked to avoid matching. I'd also like to avoid unsightly seams on see-through fabric, such as this one is. If I had seams going around the arm's eye or any place, it would be very hard to conceal them, and they wouldn't be all that pretty. And then also you want to use less fabric if it's very expensive or if you have a limited amount. Remember the blouse I made last week was this one, and there was a very limited amount. All we had of this was the shawl, and that shawl wasn't all that large. So because of these limitations, we had to decide what to do. I'll see how large this shawl was. It was only, I see, about 22 inches. It was only 44 inches square. So 44 inches square actually made a long sleeve blouse in a medium size. So it is possible with a small amount of fabric. Now the reason this particular blouse was possible to make is because, remember, I cut it on the bias. That was the only way it could be done on the straight. It wouldn't have worked. And the only thing I had left over, by the way, of this fabric was this little bit here under the arm that I cut out. It would have been like this, I guess is how it fit. But this was all that was wasted, front and back on all four sides, just along here, just that fabric. So I have 4 layers of this. Therefore, we pretty well utilized this fabric and didn't waste much of anything. So you can make a really nice blouse out of a very limited supply of fabric. And here's kind of how you do it. First of all, you're going to have to know your measurements. You're going to have to know, if it's a long sleeve blouse, how much do you measure from one wrist up across your shoulders and down to the other wrist. You need to know these measurements, and when you do, then you can decide exactly how much fabric. I measure, I think, about 1 5/8 yards there from one wrist to the other, so I could actually buy just 1 5/8 yards of fabric, 45-inch width, the usual for blouse fabrics, and I'd have enough to take me there. Now this one is even wider, but I'm going to show you kind of quickly on this how to cut it out. This one is perhaps about 60 inches wide. So I'll go ahead and cut it out with the whole distance there. Well, for the print part, yes, it is exactly 60. This is a knit fabric that I have down here, and I'm going to use the whole thing. So when I get through, these are so quick and easy. When I get through putting it together, if I have fabric that comes down here halfway over my hand, I'll trim some of it off. I'll make a big hem, whatever it takes. But what I have done with this fabric, as it came from the bolt, and you can see by the white area over here where the selvage is, what I have done with this is simply fold it in half and fold it in half the other way. So here is a fold here, a double fold up at the top, and here is a fold over on the side. So I have 4 thicknesses of fabric here actually. So it's all folded in 4ths, and if I just put it down on the table, these are the decisions I'm going to make with the tape measure. For one thing, it's a knit fabric. There will be some stretch in it. How much am I going to need? Not only around the wrist, but it's going to be a very casual fabric. So besides measuring my wrist and how much it takes to get over my hand, it might be a very good idea to measure this area up close to my elbow because it's a casual thing. I'll probably push those sleeves up. I'm not making this actually for me, but she will probably push these sleeves up. So I find I want about 10 inches there if they're pushed up. Now because this is going to be the wrist out here, and this is going to be the neck up here, and that's going to be the body, the bodice of the blouse down there. So out here at the wrist is what I'm measuring first, and I find that what I would really like to have is about 10 inches around my wrist, so half of that. 5 inches, because I have the fabric doubled here. So, and 2 wrists, so 5 inches on each of these. It'll equal 10 inches per wrist. So I've already marked this just to give me a little head start. And what this marking is not only the 5 inches I want, but also this is going to be very quickly made on the serger, and I left a seam allowance of about 1/4 inch there. So I would put a little mark here, or pins, or whatever you want. And then because I don't know how big a hem I'm going to turn up, few inches above, I want about the same marking. But then I'm going to start to curve because most of these are sort of bat wing type things. Under the arm, they do curve there. Nothing is very fitted. There's a lot of ease in it. So to get this curve, I'll gradually curve down, but right about at bust level, about however far down, I want to have it plenty wide. It's a big casual outfit, and I'm going to measure this, including seams here at the bust. Approximately 14 inches is what I have here. So with this, then it's going to get wider. What this is actually going to be is a maternity top, and so I'm going to get it a little bit wider as I go down there, just a big casual outfit. And I would probably look in the pattern books to see how wide exactly maternity outfits are around the bottom, and I find that maybe they're 60 inches wide. Okay, that would be 15 times 4, because remember I have 4 thicknesses here. So I'll make this a little extra generous, and I've made a mark here at 17 inches. So anyway, I just have a few marks here. So to cut this out, it isn't a terribly big chore. I'm just going to cut here, and I'll get a little bit wider now as I go down under the arm and to the bust area. And then I'm going to swing out here and flare it somewhat. And I have my blouse all cut out. Quick? Okay. Not too much of a chore. I have something else here that I can do with, perhaps. We'll see at another time what those scraps will make. But here we have the blouse. Now all we need is to sew up the side seams and we'll be finished, except it's going to have to be put over your head. We're going to have a neck of some sort. Well, this is going to have kind of a boat neck on it, I decided, so I'll cut a little bit out for the neck, and maybe to the center of my neck, out to, about here on my shoulder, about that wide. Measure that much. How much is it? And that's about 5 inches. So if I would measure 5 inches there, and I already have, I see, and I've made a mark. So I'm just going to cut through this, and I'll cut it around a little bit, and I will have a neckline. Now you wouldn't do this on everything, but this is a big casual thing. This is going to be a big neckline. I am going to put some ribbing around there because it's knit, so that ribbing will bring it up a little bit closer. Now it's a good idea to cut cautiously at first, not knowing exactly how big this is going to come out. So if you want to be cautious, now this is a wide neck. If you wanted to be cautious, cut a little narrower neck in the first place. See if it'll pull over your head. If it won't, cut it a little bit larger. Sometimes you don't need to pull it over your head, and here's the same t-shirt actually. This one was done the same way. This one is simply a smaller tee, and it has bands both at the neck and also at the lower edge. This one just comes down to the waist, but it's kind of the same thing. It was just folded in fourths, and then it was cut around the neck and cut under the arm. So another very simple styling. Well, because I am going to add a band to this around the neck, it will bring it in a little bit closer, so I purposely cut it slightly larger. I'm just going to hem the bottom of it and the sleeves, and probably because it's cut in a flare, I'll have to later even that hem a little bit also, have to curve it up on the edge. So that's a possibility later that I may get to. Now, a couple of them that you saw in a previous program were also patternless blouses, and they were done the same way. These were on a show dealing with metallics. And notice with these that all that has happened is the fabric was folded in fourths that way, and with it folded in fourths, the sleeves, the neck, I'll turn this around so that you see it exactly the way that I had the other blouse that I just cut out, but you can see this is the same thing. So what I did here also is measure the wrist, measure how long, and measure how wide the hips are and how wide it takes, how much fabric it takes, how much width to get over the bust because it's going to pull on. Now with this one, it has a high, tight neckline, and so all I needed here was, I'm not going to get that over my head because your neck is smaller than your head, so what I needed here is to have an opening besides, and to cut that opening to decide exactly how large it was going to have to be, what I did was just cut a little slit in the fabric, see if it'd pull over my head. If it didn't, cut the slit a little bit longer, and when it's long enough that it will actually go over your head, then that's enough, and you're ready to finish the neckline and put on a facing. Now the easy way to decide these necklines, if they aren't those big boat necks, is like this. I've made myself a little template, so it isn't completely patternless maybe, this is my little template that I use, and this is my pattern. This is all I need in order to do that. I have 2 of them here, and I'll show you where I got these. So I just keep these with my supplies, and anytime I want to make a patternless blouse, I get out one or the other. This one is for a T-neck, a T-shirt type neck. It's a little bit wider and a little bit shallower. This one's for a blouse neck. I'll show you here with my magic T-shirt pattern exactly where that came from and how I made that template. I have the back and the front here, and I don't have the shoulders together because I'm not concerned with that. I'm only concerned with the neckline shape and measurement. Therefore, I just want to overlap these to the stitching line, which would be about here, the 5/8 line. That would be about here on each one. So I'm going to put those 2 points together and then let them down flat to overlap. And I just want to make sure that this is a straight line down the center back and the center front. And if that's a straight line, I put some paper underneath this and I trace around this opening. And I don't have it quite open enough there. I simply trace around this opening, and that's where I got my little template. And while it was still down here on the table then, I marked right here where the shoulder is. So you can see a little S here for shoulder. Right here I marked a B for back, so I know that's the center back. Right here is an F for front, so this is the center front. And with this little template, the back, the front, the shoulders. Notice something else that's always true about blouses or anything that you wear. Your front neck comes down lower than the back. So here's the midpoint, the front's down lower, the back's up higher. Now what this means is if I'd be cutting out a new piece of fabric that I hadn't already cut, I'll just fold this in a different way. What this means, after I had this folded and I've cut out the rest of the blouse, that right here I'd probably want to make a little clip with my scissors. And what that little clip would be the shoulders and the center front and center back. And so that little clip right here, I would want to, as I open it up, I would want to put this template right in that place so that the little mark I have here that intersects the shoulders and the front, that's where I want to have it, that very center point. And then I could, after I have this laid out flat, just a flat piece of fabric, and I'll bring another piece of fabric up here so that I can just hold it up flat. With that flat piece of fabric, and let's say this is where I marked the neckline right here, with that I would put this neckline right in that spot, just right there, and then I would be able to cut this around. Now this is not going to fit my neck, this is the cutting line. 5/8 out bigger than that all the way around is my actual neckline. That's the stitching line. So this works beautifully. I got my other pattern the very same way. This blouse neck pattern, the different shape here, this was from taking the front and back bodice of a blouse and cutting it out the same way, so that's why it's a slightly different shape. So cut yourself a couple of little templates, and something else I did to help me out is on the back of this, so I don't have to measure every time, I have written some numbers here. I have written 31 inches out to wrist, and that includes my hem, and I've written 17 inches down to the waist. So if I make a short top, I know how big that is or how long it is. If I make a long top, I know I want beyond 17. So that helps enormously, and I have that on both of them. So this is a big help. Now, after I have this cut out, or while I'm cutting it out, sometimes I find something just really awful, which is the fact that I don't have enough fabric. It doesn't quite work. And I found with this one that I'm wearing, I had plenty of fabric on one sleeve, but on the other one I ran out. I have a seam here. It isn't too easy to see, hopefully, because I did match it, but I'd like to show you how to match that because that does happen from time to time. So right here there's a seam, and I'm going to show you how to get around that if you need to match something because you've run out of fabric. Okay, let's say that this is the end of my fabric. I need a little bit more here, and tough luck, I'm out of it. So hopefully I have some scraps that I haven't used, because what I'm going to do on this is just press under a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And after I have that pressed under, my iron wasn't really set on cotton, and I'm using cotton here. After I have that pressed under, I go to an uncut piece of fabric that I haven't done anything to, and I just find the same flower or whatever it is that matches. And in this case, it's right up here. Here's the same flower, and if I move this up high enough, it's going to exactly match when I get right to this point. Right here, it matches exactly. You can do this same thing with drapery fabrics as your matching panels, and I use this a lot. And when you're finished, you'll never know it. Up here, I've got to move just a slight bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put a piece of tape across there. That real lightweight pink hair setting tape works even better because it is so supple. And then I'm going to, on the machine, just stitch right in that little groove that I've made with the iron right here. If I just stitch a straight line there to get them all together, no one will ever know I had to piece this fabric. This is a nice little thing to know because it happens to you from time to time. And the bigger garments are, flared skirts and so on, the bigger they are, the more problems you're likely to run into because of running out of fabric in some corner. So I'll just do a little bit here and show you how it looks when it's opened up. And once it's opened up and everything works out just right, I'll pull off the tape, which I slightly stitched in the seam, so be careful that you don't do that. But you can see when it's all out straight, that is going to make just one piece of fabric. Nobody will ever know that there's a piecing there. So this is a little tip that you need to remember when you come to this. I'd like to show you some variations in the blouses that I have here because you can use these patternless blouses for so many different things. Here's one that is the very same thing, just a patternless blouse. When I cut this out, I put a little blip out here on one side, and that's because this is worn over pants and it just ties here at the side waist. So I cut it out the same old way. Whoops, this is really tied in several knots. It's going to stay securely at that waist. But see how even though on the one side I cut a straight seam, out on the other side I cut this extra wing here so that it could be tied. But other than that, it's the very same thing, and then it buttons down the front and you simply bind those edges if that is to your liking. And you could have buttons on the sleeves, or you could have them large enough that they just go over without any problem. Here's one where I had less fabric, but that's all right. I was going to wear it in the summer anyway, so I simply made shorter sleeves. This is above the elbow length, and that works out if this is probably about a yard of fabric. About a yard is what this measures, so that works out just fine as long as you don't have very much fabric. If you don't have enough length to tuck in your skirt, then you do something of this sort. Add a band to it, and this band can be either straight or shaped, but this band is going to extend it so now it's an over blouse because I didn't have quite enough to put to tuck in, to put under. Another one is, this is just a huge thing and it goes over another dress, but same patternless blouse, and this is extra large with elastic at the waist and at the bottoms, and this buttons on then to another dress that's worn under it, so these buttons just coincide with the button on that dress. So another little quick change that you can make if you're traveling and need a whole lot of outfits. This is one of my favorite ones, and this is the one that I showed you. The fabric that I showed you at first is that see-through fabric, so I wanted to avoid any seams if I possibly could. Now what was kind of fun about this one is the fact that as I cut this out, here was the end of the fabric. This was kind of narrow fabric, and this was the fold of the fabric as it came off the bolt, as they always are, all these patternless blouses. This is the fold here on the shoulder, and down here was the selvage. Well, there wasn't enough to come below the waist at all. It only came to the waist, and that was it. But as I cut this out, look what I have here, this semicircle. This semicircle, if you can picture it, has been turned upside down, and it is now this peplum down here at the bottom of the blouse. And then I've just, as I stitched the two together, I just made an elastic casing, and it's covered up by a little belt. But it makes a nice evening blouse, and every bit of fabric is used. What I cut out of there, I put down for the peplum, and nothing went to waste. Some other blouses. Now you realize that when you see these blouses on, that they kind of fall on the shoulders unless you wear shoulder pads, because remember, they're cut straight out. So sometimes you want to do a little something extra, as I've done here on the blouse that I'm wearing. You want to change the shoulder a little bit so that it does pick up, so that it doesn't just droop, as frankly those two metallic and embellished ones, they droop a little bit. They don't really do as they should, they droop. So to avoid that, if you would like to, here are some things you can do, and I'll just bring them over here to show you. This one is a striped fabric. So because of its stripes, notice how it looks like puffed set-in sleeves when it's worn, but it actually is this patternless blouse. What I've done around the neck is do all these lines of stitching. I've stitched out the gray stripes and just have the blue stripes showing before I then put a neck piece in. And because those stripes brought it up too short, here again, you put something at the waist, some band so you can wear it as an over blouse. So this is one way to bring the shoulders up so they're straight here instead of big wrinkles drooping down. This one does droop down, but it's such a soft fabric, it didn't make a bit of difference. This one also has a band. Here's a way the sleeves can fasten. I folded up a big hem, and within a couple of little folds I've put loop buttonholes, and they go over to fasten the wrist tightly. So that might be something you want to do. On the wrist that I'm wearing, I have another type of opening. This one, instead of the little loops, this one I actually just made a fold here and then made buttonholes. So another way of doing it. Think through what is to your liking. What this does, besides just folding over and fastening into a tight wrist, it also makes a little pleat here. And when it's being worn, it actually looks like there's a big cuff here sewn on separately. It doesn't look like it's all one piece of fabric, which it actually is. Another summer blouse. This one with an exterior facing is what provides that stripe that's going the contrasting direction. This big boat neckline, the stripe, the horizontal stripe here was simply put inside, stitched against it, and then flipped to the outside to make the facing on the outside and finish the neck edge all in one piece. And that facing just goes on all the way out to the edge of the sleeves. So think through what your fabrics will do and how they'll work out. Now, as far as getting those shoulders up the way the blouse is that I'm wearing, here's one that shows you more easily how this can be done. This is a summer blouse. It was cut the same way, but it's a summer blouse, so it has shorter sleeves. They're above the elbow and kind of little butterfly sleeves. Well, originally they came right up here straight, but what I did on this to make it stay up on the shoulders nicely, what I did on this was to take my t-shirt pattern or a blouse pattern, which I put down here on my very low table down there. I put this down on the fabric, and I marked it exactly where the shoulders should be. I marked the fabric here on the front and also on the back. And then with those markings in place, notice how the shoulders have this little pleat in it. I had those marking lines, and I simply brought those markings then to the center and pinned them in place and stitched them around here, top stitched them all in place. As you see, there's top stitching. And that's what makes this blouse fit nicely without shoulder pads to hold it up. It just fits my shoulders. I have a natural shoulder line on it then. I've done the same thing on the blouse I'm wearing, but notice how I brought these tucks to the outside instead. So instead of being a seam down on the inside as the summer blouse is, on this blouse that I'm wearing, I have them on the outside as a decorative feature. But it accomplishes the same purpose. It picks the blouse up so I don't have big wrinkles here so it doesn't droop, and that stitching keeps it up in shape, and it makes kind of a little pleat that joins the pleat down here. So it makes a nice feature. Now the blouse I'm wearing, I did use that template from the blouse, not the t-shirt. I used the blouse neck template. So it's just a high standard jewel neckline, and then I simply put a straight band around for the mandarin and the stand-up collar. Another thing I did on this, and I do on many blouses, is at times there is a blouse that's a big print that you really don't want to destroy, that you really want to match. So I'm going to show you another little matching trick. I'll just put that one back. This is not a patternless blouse I'm showing, but this is the matching that I would like to show you because this is something that nobody seems to do. A couple of big name designers do it, and their things cost thousands of dollars. The average manufacturer will never bother with this. And what it is the fact that I have an opening here, but notice how this design, and I just pulled this blouse even though it isn't a patternless one, because this illustrates it so easily with its big design. I like to see that match. Now what you ordinarily see any time a manufacturer has done it, or look through the pattern books and you'll see it off also. They won't have it exactly matched. They always look a little bit like this. Okay, see how it repeats? It doesn't blend in exactly. It's a little bit off. About a ½ inch off is what you always see. And the reason for this is that they are trying to match this outer edge, this fold. On an earlier program, I told you about extensions. That's the distance from the center front out to that fold. You don't need to allow that extension. So I'll do a little demo up here and show you how to do this. Here is one miniature blouse front that I've already cut off. I've already cut out. So I use this small half-size pattern, and I've cut this blouse out so that I have a prominent tulip right here upside down. Flowers on this fabric went every which way. So I cut it out with that tulip showing. Now, typically, I'm afraid what every manufacturer is doing is, as I said, matching this outside fold. What is important is that center front line. So with this pattern opened up, I'm going to make a little clip or make a mark with a marker. It's just that this fabric I'm using is so, the design is just so big and dark and you can't see a little mark on it. So I'm making a clip here. I'm going to make another clip at the bottom, right on the center front, so that I know exactly where this center front is. And then with these two clips I have, and you can see here's a clip, there's an opening right there, and here's another clip down here. I'm going to, on an uncut piece of fabric that I haven't done anything with, I'm going to put this cut piece down so that it just folds or just works in. It can't be seen at all. I find it's right here. I'm going to then, where the clip is, put a pin here. I'm going to put a pin right here at the top where the clip is. I'm going to take my pattern piece and turn it over, because now I want a left front. And I'm going to put it down with the center front at these two pins, cut out the second side, and it's going to turn out perfectly every time. Well, I've really enjoyed bringing you this series, but there are dozens of subjects we didn't even have time to touch. The answer is, of course, another series sometime in the future. If there are some details or techniques you'd especially like to see, drop me a line and I'll try to include them. In the meantime, I wish you a lot of enjoyment and satisfaction in your sewing, your connection to the world of fashion, but translated into your terms.